Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, before we get into that, I want to make a brief PSA to people who want to debate or argue with me. Because there have been a couple of people very recently that have been trying to engage and debate and discuss with me and are completely fucking wrong on everything. Basically making up complete arguments that I have never made in my entire life, and just pretending that those are the arguments, even going so far as to claim that I am some sort of MSNBC liberal account. Fucking idiots. I really do not understand. It's like, how are you here and not know who what I've been doing for the past 6 years? So that's one thing, but also this is a weird trend I've seen, especially recently, where it's like a person will try to engage with me, try to debate, discuss, or whatever, and then magically, after a while, after I keep trying to get them to be like, hey, I'm trying to get them to explain their points or whatever, after a while, they just delete everything. I really don't understand why they do that. There was this fucking stupid Degrassi, fan account that was literally trying to be they try to engage with me, and it's then after a while, they just deleted everything. It's why would you even do that? It's happened multiple times. It's kind of weird. Either that or YouTube is taking them down because I keep getting really, really mean to them in the comments. Because I'm sure as hell not deleting them. Why would I? I keep winning all the arguments. And I want that to exist for posterity's sake, just so people can be look at how stupid these fucking losers are. Because YouTube has done the same thing on other times where someone will literally reply and then they'll be like, why'd you delete my reply? And I'm like, I didn't. YouTube just doesn't show it for some reason. I don't know why. And they do it in a way where I literally can't find it. It's not even hidden in my thing where it's oh, we're hiding these ones. They just flat out delete them. If you were deleted from my channel, you would be deleted. You wouldn't be able to comment anything. I mean, I have banned people from my channel from commenting. I banned a minor from commenting on the channel because you're a child. Stop commenting on my channel. I also banned this MAGA guy because I kept asking him a point blank question that he refused to answer. And it's if you're not going to engage with me, then I have no reason for you to even be here. If you can comment on another thread or another video and you see and your reply is there, that means and I replied to you, that means I didn't do anything to your thread. Why would I? If I wanted to remove you from engaging with me, period, you'd just be flat out removed from engaging, period. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, let us find something that is completely rare in the modern day and age. Good news! And it is coming from Sri Lanka. Now, there's a little bit of a history about Sri Lanka that I gotta explain for those who might not know. So, unknown to me, and presumably a lot of people, Sri Lanka had a major upset in politics in September, where a large group of the population, let's see. Okay, I was going to say it was an increase, but no, it was actually a decrease because in 2022, the Sri Lanka presidential election had almost 99% turnout. And, actually above 99% turnout, but this one had 79%. But, regardless, what happened was that Sri Lanka had a massive political upset because in September, the presidential election happened, and a guy who I will greatly mispronounce his name, you'll see it when you look it up, a Sri Lankan president, referred to his initials AKD, he is the guy who was currently president of Sri Lanka because he had a major upset in the Sri Lankan presidential election. The party in and of itself that they are doing is not that old, and it's actually really impressive that they're doing somewhat well. Okay, so basically, what happened was the Sri Lanka, this is it, their party, or at least first there's the party and there's a coalition, you see, because the party, I can't pronounce the name of the party either. The translation is People's Liberation Front. That party is the specific party of the Sri Lankan president currently. It is a socialist, Marxist-Leninist, left-wing nationalist, anti-imperialist, progressive, and Sinhalese nationalist party, with the broader political alliance that his party has being the National People's Power Alliance, which is a broadly socialist, reformist, progressive, left-wing populist faction. But the thing is, one of the first things that he said when he got elected was okay, so we know that this situation, because he knew what the situation would be. He knew that he would probably not be able to get a lot of things done under the current parliament. So what he did was, a couple of days after he won, he decided to call the parliament up and basically be like, yo, parliament, you're dissolved, and then call for immediate new elections for the parliament in order to facilitate them becoming an actual viable force. Let's see what happens. And what ended up happening was very interesting. In the last election for Parliament, 2020, the party got 3.84% of the vote and 3 seats in the Parliament. In this most recent election, they got 61.56% of the vote and 159 seats in the Parliament. A 156 seat increase. There's not much else I could say except Sri Lankans really know what's up. Apparently, this is actually really interesting for a number of reasons. One thing is that this situation also came about because the Sri Lankan, they had a recent protest movement which gave rise to these left-wing political movements. And sure enough, it's seemingly doing well. So yeah, congrats to Sri Lanka for possibly getting good things. Can't wait for bad things to happen in America. But before we get into America, why don't we head over to New Zealand? Because New Zealand has a very interesting thing that just happened. So what happened is that the ACT Party of New Zealand basically is pushing really hard against the founding document of New Zealand. If you don't remember, I did an episode on New Zealand politics, and they are the one Western-ish nation that has a somewhat good relationship with their indigenous populations, working out a specific treaty and deal. And what ended up happening is that ACT New Zealand has been trying really hard to make sure that founding document and everything that founding document has is basically stripped away so that the Māori people are fucked over. And what ended up happening is that the right-wing parties, of course, voted for this bill. And then what ended up happening is that the Māori party, the party that is explicitly advocating for the Māori people, in response to this, decided to disrupt Parliament with a haka, which is apparently just an indigenous dance, or an indigenous insult that they give to, and a lot of Westerners, of course, jumped on it. Even some random libs started getting really mad about it and be like, oh, well, they started wagging their fingers oh, how dare they be all crazy. It's 100% on board with the Māori people. The Māori party is 100% the best party of the group. Although I will say it makes me feel inferior knowing that the person who led the charge is actually 2 years younger than me. So, well, what can I say? Speaking of 2 years, French prosecutors are seeking a 2-year prison sentence and an eligibility period for Marine Le Pen. Paris prosecutors on Wednesday requested a 2-year prison sentence for far-right leader Marine Le Pen and an additional 5-year period for an eligibility to run for office in a trial over the suspected embezzlement of European Parliament funds, where her ability to participate in the 2027 presidential election is at stake. The National Rally Party and 25 of its officials, including Le Pen, are accused of having used the money intended for the European Union Parliament aids to instead pay staff who worked for the party between 2004 and 2016 in violation of the 27 nation bloc's regulations. The National Rally was called the National Front at the time. Prosecutors asked the court to declare Le Pen guilty and impose a 300,000 euro fine and 3 more years of suspended prison sentence. They request that the period of ineligibility be declared effective immediately, independent of whether Le Pen files an appeal or not. So basically, France is trying their best to make sure that Le Pen can't win. I mean, it's very this is how it works in other nations. In other nations, when corrupt politicians are corrupt, bad things happen. They go to jail, or they face the ability to not run for office. Not in other nations. And by other nations, I mean the United States. Speaking of the United States has been doing a lot of iffy things, and one big thing that I need to show is this, because of the change in the administration that is going to be coming up. It's led to some very bad hombres to get into a very bad situation. And of course, who else could I be referring to? Israel. With Israel, apparently, Israeli minister pushing for West Bank settlement annexation, eyeing the Trump administration's support. Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who, I should remind you, has stated that he is a proud homophobe and fascist, has ordered preparations for the annexation of settlements in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Smotrich, who was in charge of the settlements, said on Monday that he has instructed his department to prepare for the necessary infrastructure for applying sovereignty. It is unclear whether his long-standing desire to apply full Israeli law in the West Bank settlements has any chance of becoming implemented soon. The Prime Minister's office is yet to comment on Smotrich's order. However, earlier Monday, Gideon Saar, Israel's new foreign minister, told a press briefing that the government had made no decision on the issue of annexation yet, but noted it has been discussed during Donald Trump's first term as U.S. president, and added that if it will be relevant, we will discuss it again with our friends in Washington. Observers say that Smotrich's announcement was likely motivated in large part by staking out the political ground of Israel's fractious domestic politics. Still, it drew swift condemnation from the Palestinian Authority, whose Foreign Affairs Ministry categorized the comment as a blatantly colonial and racist extension of the ongoing campaign of extermination and forced displacement against the Palestinian people. Now, keep in mind, think about that. Remember they said they talked about full-on annexation of the West Bank during the first Trump administration. We haven't been hearing any talks about that during the Biden administration. And now they're open to talking about it again in a second Trump administration. So yeah, keep that in mind, guys. Keep that in mind. Remember that. Remember that. And you guys are very much wondering, why did you vote for Kamala? I wonder why. Speaking of Israel, Twitch has actually decided to do a little bit of an interesting thing. And this is because of a larger thing that has been going on recently. You see, this is actually kind of built upon a very big thing that's been going on recently. So here's what's been going on. We are all aware of a man by the name of Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker used to run a show called Leftovers with a internet has-been named Ethan Klein, also known as H3H3. And basically, their show kind of completely fell apart because Ethan Klein had no clue who Hassan Piker was, and just randomly assumed that this is the dumbest thing. This is really the fucking dumbest thing. Okay. There's a lot of things that I can say about Ethan Klein. Ethan Klein's like fucking dumb, stupid piece of shit. Like, irrelevant. He's one of the people who is one of the reasons why Elon Musk is so loved on the internet, because he was one of the people who sucked Elon Musk every day. He really loved Jordan Peterson. He, explicitly invites, far-right Republicans on his show multiple times, including, but not limited to, Joey Salads, who tried to make it so that it looked like black people were trying to hurt Trump supporters, alongside Jordan Peterson, who allowed him to spew his stupid nonsense on his podcast, and then only very recently was he wait, hold on, I don't like that. Because that's what he does. He coughs and stuff because he's, a smoker or something, or whatever. I don't really know. He, basically defended JonTron after JonTron did a lot of his extremely racist things, was best friends with Justin Roiland during all the whole, shenanigans with Justin Roiland. Basically, Ethan Klein is a really fucking stupid person who keeps associating with people he really shouldn't be associating with. And one of the things that really, really, really seemed to get under his skin was when Hassan Piker was basically very critical of Israel. Like every normal, rational human being would do. Then he would get mad because people would try to explain to Ethan Klein about certain issues of Israel, and Ethan Klein would get mad because he's a Zionist. That's a fact. He tried to make I'm not a Zionist. It's do you believe Israel has a right to exist as a state? As a Jewish state? Congratulations, Ethan. You're a Zionist. And Ethan basically he literally just decided to throw his entire whatever. He was already kind of becoming a has-been by the time he joined with Hassan Piker to make Leftovers show. But then it got way worse. So when he joined it with Hassan Piker, then left Hassan Piker because this is real. This is apparently real. Ethan Klein, apparently, when he joined a show with Hassan Piker, he legitimately thought Hassan Piker was a social democrat. In what world do you look at Hassan Piker and go, that guy's a social democrat? You're insane. It's the same situation where with Jordan Peterson or with Joey Salads, I thought this person was this thing. It's how do you not know? How would you not know? And basically, Ethan Klein has been going really, really hard against Hassan Piker, and Hassan Piker has been effectively having to go and, like, attack him back. Because it's just like, that's just kind of how it is. Don't dish out what you can't take. And as is typical, Ethan Klein cries anti-Semitism, even though, like, he literally is like, why don't you listen to Jewish friends? And then Hassan Piker will literally invite, like, 15 Jewish guests all at once, and they'll all be like, yeah, what Hassan's saying isn't anti-Semitic at all. And then Ethan Klein will be like, no. Like, no. Like, that's what happens. And he's been going really, really hard against, like Hassan and people, like, doing many fucking quote-unquote exposés and just completely destroying whatever semblance of a career he has because he is pissing and shitting himself over the fact that they can't bomb children in Palestine. And he's been doing everything he can to try and get Hassan and other people associated with him banned off of Twitch. And one of the things that Twitch is apparently doing now is that they are changing their hateful content policy to include the word Zionist as a potential slur following criticism. Now, this is one of the big things. Now, I'm going to say something that will be slightly hot take, but bear with me. That isn't in and of itself 100% the worst idea. But here's the problem. It's not bad in the sense that you need to... Like, this is the problem with all this kind of stuff. What's going to happen is that every single semblance of the word Zionist on Twitch will then be labeled as anti-Semitic and will be, like, facing punishments towards all the channels that do this. But what that should be doing is we should be looking... Like, this is the problem with all these other things. Since it's all automatic, analytic AI, it's going to automatically flag these things when you should have humans who review these things to actually understand this. Like, this is going to open a very huge Pandora's box. Like, for example, video number 1, we have a video that says, here is the ideology of Zionism. Zionism is the ideology that was founded in this year, blah, 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 and is the creation and maintaining of a Jewish state, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, other video used Zionist as a slur for Jew. Under Twitch's new law, it's like, oh, these two are the same thing to me. It's like, it's not. But yeah, Twitch is going to be a hellscape. Congratulations. Speaking of hellscape, let's talk about the Trump cabinet. Because Trump has been going really, really hard on the presidential cabinet. Like, he's, like, announcing the cabinet members. And the first thing I'll say about it is this. A lot of people are very confused because a lot of the people that he's talking about appointing to cabinet positions are members of Congress. I mean, actually, there aren't that many. There's only, like, 2 members of Congress that have been appointed for cabinet level positions. But people are pointing out the fact that they have a slim majority in the U.S. House. So it's going to be a very difficult situation if Trump keeps doing this. Now, some people are a little bit curious. Why is Trump doing this? Well, there are a multitude of reasons. One of the big reasons is this fact. He wants to appoint people who aren't necessarily the biggest fans of him. I mean, I'll get to that. I know this might not be the best explanation because of who he's appointing, but bear with me. But one thing that he did in his first administration was that he appointed people who didn't like him and then made that so that their Senate seats or whatever, or their House seats would get opened up and, like, would get a right-wing replacement for him, like, be an appointment that would be aligning with him. But what would end up happening is that afterwards he would fire them and replace them with a true loyalist. There are a lot of situations that are like that, but let's just get into some of the cabinet members, shall we? Alright, so I'm only going to go over the important cabinet members, the ones that are actually, like, relevant and important that people should care about. So I'm not going to go over the chief of staff, who gives a shit about Susie Wiles. I guess I will mention she was a member of the Trump, like, presidential campaign, so it's like, yeah, whatever. Secretary of Homeland Security is Kristi Noem, who has no experience in the position whatsoever. Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, is a choice that actually a lot of people kind of saw coming, because the Secretary of the Interior is kind of the, I don't want to say too much, but, like, it's kind of seen as the most indigenous-friendly position in the U.S. cabinet, and Doug Burgum apparently does have a very close relationship with the, like, indigenous population. So apparently it does make a little bit of sense that he is in the position that he is. Former Representative Doug Collins is the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He is a veteran who is a Trump loyalist. That's kind of, like, obvious that why he was appointed. The director of the CIA is John Ratcliffe, who is a member of the Trump cabinet in the last position, who was regarded as using his position at the time to be scoring political points for Trump. So, and he would make, he would say things that would be at a complete antithesis of what the actual positions and government would do. Elise Stefanik would be appointed to the ambassador to the UN, because of course she would. Lee Zeldin got appointed to the EPA, and he's a climate change denier, so of course. The Secretary of Defense is a Fox News host named Pete Hegseth. Quite literally, that is the position that he has been put in. A Fox News host is going to be a member of the U.S. cabinet if he gets confirmed. But I'm sure you all probably want to know, there are 4 people that are on the cabinet, and I'm pretty sure you all want to hear me talk about the most. First, very obvious one, most important secretary in the cabinet is the Secretary of State. And, as Trump has said, it's Rubio, who I am not enthused by because Marco Rubio is a neocon warhawk. When everyone was so surprised, why would he pick Rubio? It's of course he picked fucking Rubio. Rubio has been sucking Trump off ever since the 2016 election, and his political positions are identical to Donald Trump. Now you might say, well, but he's a neocon. He's not a Trump. Guys, I'm gonna be real. I'm sick and tired of people who say that neocons and Trumpsters are not the same thing. Guys, I hate to break it to you. The Trump admin, Trump's presidency, he is a neocon and an isolationist. You might say, how right-wing isolationism is not any really that much different from a neocon, if you think about it. American isolationists and American neocons both have extreme American exceptionalism in their ideologies, neither of which are actually opposed to the idea of the U.S. intervening in wars that push their own interests. Neocons just do it a way more explicitly. Isolationists pretend they don't want to get involved in wars, but they will if they do. Woodrow Wilson was an isolationist. He pulled us into the worst war the United States has ever been a part of. Much the same with Trump. He claims that he's an isolationist, yet he wants to get us involved with wars in Iran, he wants to get us involved in wars in the Latin America, etc., etc. And unfortunately, Rubio, of all of them, seems to be the most likely to get picked for the actual position because all of the Washington establishment really loves him. One of the ones that is most interesting that a lot of people have been pointing out is Matt Gaetz getting appointed to Attorney General. And what is even more interesting is the reason why he's doing this. For starters, he's of course made it very abundantly clear that if he did actually win the position, which he probably won't, that he wants to make the world worse. He's actively made it so that he believes that, he has stated that this was released today, where he stated that he wants the United States to adopt the criminal justice proceedings of El Salvador, the fascist state. Call it a hunch, but this guy shouldn't be here. Not helped by the fact that this is the big thing. The only reason why he did this was so that he wouldn't have to face a House ethics scandal. Because remember, Matt Gaetz fucked a 17-year-old, and he literally was about to be investigated and released. The investigation into him was about to be released tomorrow, or whenever, to the day after he was chosen for the position. And then he immediately resigned from his House seat, coincidentally at the same time that the House ethics scandal would get released. And since he's no longer a member of the House, they can't release the ethics scandal. Interesting development. The most draconian of all of them, it's funny, he's not even the most draconian. The worst, the one that is kind of seen as the worst, is that the Secretary of Health and Human Services is apparently going to possibly be Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Conservatives start calling themselves because they're literally just they immediately go to, do you want the current Health and Human Services person to be in charge? Even though it's Xavier Becerra. They point to this picture of one of the people who's even in, I don't even know what position they are or who they are even. I really don't know, but it's a person, and they're like, do you really want this person to be in charge of the health? It's this person is a qualified doctor, so yes, I would prefer the doctor as opposed to the person who has zero medical experience. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is really, 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 really doing things that are going to be very, very bad, and it's really, really. One of the big things that is really bad is the fact that he literally stated, especially during his presidential campaign, that he wants to make it so that for at the very least 8 years, when he was running for president, because he was I'm gonna run for president, I'll be president for 8 years, fucking idiot. but at least I would assume at least it's shortened to 4 years because he could only serve for 4 years in a Trump administration. But he would halt the investigations into all infectious disease. What? But of course, the one that probably a lot of you want to hear me talk about is the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is apparently being appointed to the Director of National Intelligence. Very funny that the person who has been accused of being a member of the Russian intelligence agencies, of being like a Russian asset, is apparently going to get involved in the intelligence agencies. And much like the fact that that CIA guy used to be in this position, a lot of people are worried that Tulsi Gabbard is going to be using this to try and push the Trump administration's goals in the, whatever, especially the more draconian aspects of it. A lot of senators have already come out and said they probably wouldn't appoint Tulsi Gabbard, but I am saying this is the one thing I am curious about. I would absolutely love to see a committee hearing where Tulsi Gabbard has to answer questions from Bernie Sanders. Because I really just want to know, I want to see how fucking, I really, really, really want to see him just confront her. Or I want to see if he has, the brain rot loyalty of, she's my friend, I have to be loyal to her. But anyways, with all that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. This episode's script is literally titled just Liberal Suck Episode because of the fact that I had put a poll up and it was there are 4 names that I had for this episode. There were 4 titles of this episode that I had in my mind when I was thinking of this episode. Liberals are not your friends. This is what I originally envisioned the episode to be. Because this is an episode that I had an idea back. I had way early on. I think at the beginning of the year I had this idea. But I held off of it for the time being because I wanted to wait till after the election. Because I did not want this to be misconstrued as to me, not endorsing Kamala Harris or, believing that we should have voted for the Democratic nominee. It wasn't that. I wanted to make sure that it was more of, just purely an ideological standpoint. The other title that I had for this podcast was Why I Am Not a Liberal, which is a continuation of a sub-series that I've had on this channel for, I believe, released 2 episodes of it, Why I'm Not a Socialist, Why I'm Not a Communist. And that first title, kind of a bit out of date, but Why Liberalism is Stupid, which is just kind of a way to, shit on liberals. But the title that ended up winning out, according to the poll that I had, is this, the very hyperbolic and very clickbaity-ish title, Liberalism is Dead. Now, regardless of the title, all 4 of these things will be addressed in this episode. Maybe it would have, changed how I slightly structured the episode, but here's the thing. I actually just forego that. That's why I put the poll up. And I put this little explanation at the beginning of this, the notes that I have for this episode. It's so that we can just be okay, all these things will be addressed, so I can, just focus on the script, writing or whatever, that really works for me. Focus on the ideas that I'm going to espouse, rather than kind of, this specific way to structure it. Alright? Now that we got it out of the way, I think we should address one thing first. What is liberalism? To which I point out that I have a video on this channel with that very same question in the title, because I address the fact that liberalism has become a somewhat amorphous ideology in its many years of existence. So if you really want to know fully, in depth, I would recommend watching that episode first. Especially considering that episode is a lot more unbiased. I've tried to do this. For those videos, I try to make it so that it's as unbiased as I can. I literally just explain the definition of liberalism and how that has changed over its many years of life. How liberalism went from John Locke to FDR to Bill Clinton. But if you're not going to do that, or even if you are going to do that, here's a quick explanation broadly. The basic definition of liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on the rights of the individual, liberty, consent of the governed, political equality, rights to private property, and equality before the law. At the first glance, you might go, what's the problem? And yeah, you're right. For most people, especially those who are just getting into politics, what's the problem with that idea? If you literally get into politics and you really just don't like conservatism, liberalism is kind of like the most de facto thing you can get to. Liberalism loves the gays. They love weed. They love abortion. Hell, the best presidents in the United States' history are considered liberals. FDR, Teddy Roosevelt, LBJ, like, you know, those guys. I mean, and this is one of the, this is a slight thing that I need to explain, because this is a little bit of a, this is one thing I do have to kind of like get into arguments about, and it's just kind of like this notion of like progressivism and liberalism kind of being the same thing, when it's like that's not necessarily true, but the way Wiki explains it is kind of like really complicated. A lot of people are put under the branch of liberalism that really don't need to be there. On Wikipedia, if you go to like the like a list of American liberals page, it literally includes Bernie in it, even though he has explicitly stated, I am not a liberal. But then you get into arguments about like, oh, but the broad ideological tenets or blah blah blah. It's like it's really complicated to explain, especially to an American. In America, we really just don't understand political terms. We legitimately go like, a liberalism is everything from like Bill Clinton to the left. Especially considering we don't have like a very like hardcore socialist movement in the United States. At least that's what political scientists say, but that's not true. Obviously, we know the Socialist Party did really well in multiple times in U.S. history, but regardless. But another thing is like, yeah, but like generally it looks fine. Like the U.S. presidents that were the best were considered liberals, and the areas that the U.S. did really well in were the ones where liberals were running things. Quite literally. 50s and 60s, kind of like that's the kind of the time period that America's kind of seen as like having like a really big post-war economic boom, and like civil rights and like economic rights were really getting through the roof. I mean, at the time, I think like corporations had like a 95% tax rate. That sounds really good, right? That sounds based and red-pilled. So how can I then go from that to going liberals? Ugh. Well, that's where you're going to have to start digging in a little deeper. And I guess rather than dilly-dallying around the point, it all boils down to, like, all those questions before boil down to one simple thing. Every single aspect of liberal analysis is surface-level garbage that will never address the root of the problem. This has been true in the past, this has been true in the present, and unless things change, more than likely in the future, on every single issue. Foreign policy, domestic policy, social policy, especially economic policy. All surface-level garbage drivel. Best case scenario is that it will lead to short-term benefits, but worst case, it will be 100% performative nonsense that will hurt any chance of real change. And I have a ton of examples to back up my claim. Let's start off with the biggest thing, like one of the big things that it says right there, in liberalism. Definition, political equality. Equality. It's right there in the description. They say they support equality. And yet they support capitalism, the ideology, the economic system that allows massive amounts of inequality. If inequality isn't a thing, it's not capitalism. It's not working right. That's one of the things that I find really perplexing about like liberals when they get like mad about like wealth inequality. It's like, this is your economic system working. This is what your system gives. You're getting mad at a bike when the wheels turn. This is what you have advocated for. This is the system that you believe works. Well, yes, a lot of modern day, like social and modern liberals will like address certain things to try and lessen the blow. Like, you know, modern social liberals created the welfare state. But again, those are like band-aids on a problem. Like those are band-aids on bullet holes. Let's take a look at the biggest accomplishment of the liberals in America. Social Security. Now, let's explain. Social Security. It requires you to work up to the age of 67 to get the benefits to retire. And the average lifespan of humans in the United States is around 77 years. And society considers human beings like when you turn 18, you need to become a self-sufficient adult and start working. Like you need to start working and get a real job, get out of the house, blah blah blah, all that stuff. We know that's not true, but you know, that's what society tells us. So they want you to work from age 18 to 67 to get benefits. Like, think about it. You get to work for 49 years of your life to get benefits for around 10. That's not even addressing the fact that we are given a lot of societal ills that make it so that that lifespan gets smaller. You know, alcohol, smoking, fatty foods. things that will generally make the lifespan smaller, so you might not even get the ability to get that Social Security benefits. Other social programs have very rigid rules that you have to follow in order to get them. One of the most common, all of them revolve around capitalism. The idea that you make too much to qualify, even if you're struggling. I know this is anecdotal, but it is very common for people to be like, I was working and I wanted to get this benefit, but I was told that I made this much over the line, and the only way I could qualify for this is if I literally quit and do not get any economic help. Even though that makes sense, I'm working for this wage that will help me pay for my bills and stuff, but I'm looking for this added help to make it so that I'm able to then, get food and whatever, this other stuff, get other things. This stuff that I'm working on right now is purely going to do with the economy. This is just to keep the lights on. This is just to keep the fire on. This is just to keep that on. This is just for that. This is just for us to get water. This is what we're doing. And I just need a little extra money for food. And you won't give me that unless I literally make it so that I don't have fire, I don't have heat, I don't have electricity. That's what you're telling me. How free can you truly be when you need to pay to keep yourself alive? How equal can you be when this is the situation of your life? How equal can you really be? Sure, you can make it so that you're equal, in certain sense. This is the weird thing. It's equality, unless it's for economy. Economy, no, we can't be equal in that. Why not? Why not? They only want to focus on, equality as, if you're gay, and don't be discriminated against. But not when it comes to economical, things. No. Speaking of social issues, well, at least they support X social issue. But do they really? Unfortunately, very similar. It's a surface level analysis that won't address the big issues of the problem. A famous example is in the civil rights movement. Liberals like to paint themselves as the white saviors of the oppressed Negro. That's what they did. JFK and LBJ, we are the white saviors for these people. We did all this to help. Abraham Lincoln, he was the savior. He was the liberal savior, the white liberal savior. But then you do some research and you realize, something's not quite right. Again, Malcolm X is very notorious for his hatred of white liberals, seeing them as wolves in sheep's clothing, because he understood, much like everyone else, that ultimately they don't want to get to the root of the problem. Liberals will fawn all day about Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Don't mention about the fact that he was a socialist who advocated against war and capitalism because that was more of the broader issue. He understood that just because the piece of paper says black people are not treated equally under the eyes of the law won't address any of the problems. He still understood, yes, we need to have it so that on the law, in the books, black people are no longer allowed to be discriminated against. But he knew that's not the end all be all. Just because there's a piece of paper that says black people have to be, you have to have it so that black people can go in this store now. That doesn't mean all of a sudden black people are magically going to be treated 100% equally to white people. They still have systemic problems. There's still a big one being economic issues. Black wages didn't go up until the whole wages of the United States went up. But liberals didn't want to address that part. They don't even want to address that today. Because that's not surface level. Surface level is when Martin Luther King Jr. goes on the stage and says, racism is bad. Wow, you really showed us there, guys. Yeah, racism bad. Yeah, we understand that. What are you gonna do to address these problems? A lot of people like to point out the fact that conservatives like to misinterpret MLK's message, but a lot of liberals do this too. I had an argument with a person who was who claimed that they were center left, they were a liberal, and then they're like, oh yeah, I blah blah blah. I agree with this. I too believe in a colorblind society. You idiot. Martin Luther King Jr. did not advocate for a colorblind society. Not a single person who is for racial equality in any of the senses advocates for a colorblind society. Because that removes their whole that removes their race. What are you talking about? They just don't want to be discriminated against because of their race. They don't want you to remove race entirely. Really? I don't understand. It's they literally just look, I don't see color. You're a person. It's yeah, we understand. Yes, I'm a person, but also, they're just so weird. And no individual will truly be colorblind. That's a fact. Nobody will truly be colorblind. So you need to stop pretending, oh yeah, I reject, like, they just want to act like, oh yeah, we're holier than thou, essentially. And I think this interpretation kind of played a huge part in MLK Malcolm X's rivalry, because Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., I think the rivalry between them is honestly really overblown, but the fact of the matter is, I think some of that does play a role, because Malcolm X was notorious for not really liking the white liberal, and he didn't really like the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. kind of tried to, like, align himself with, to an extent, the white liberal. And it's why Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. are two people that are two sides of the same coin in a good sense. They addressed criticisms between each of their own ideologies. They're two people that you do need to analyze and actually understand, because they both say, like, a hot take, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X are good people, but they have a surface level analysis that won't address the full issues. Like, Martin Luther King Jr., he's more palatable to surface level issues. Malcolm X is more of like a systemic issue problem. That's why he ultimately believed in even some of the quote-unquote cringe things that he believed in, like black separatism, because he truly believed that he thought that the system cannot truly be reformed, so it's best to scrap the whole system entirely. Liberals are too confident in the system, and that leads to a lot of things. Like, because, listen to this, Civil Rights Act of 1964, it banned overt racial discrimination. Great. Good. Great. Civil Rights Act of 1964, great bill. It bans overt racial discrimination. But that's all it did. It did not do anything to address any other issues in this regard. So, like, literally, in the South, they had overt segregation. We know this. Coloreds here, whites here. Separate but equal. Even though it wasn't equal because of all this other stuff that we understand. We understand this stuff. But let's put a hypothetical. What if we hypothetically had a system where black people just so happened to be drawn in specific neighborhoods that just so happened to be put in situations where they can only get low-income jobs, and just so happen to have it so that the school system is worse because you only have to pay for, like, the way you do schooling is because of property taxes. So you just so happen, like, you didn't, like, make it so that, oh, like, this is the black neighborhood. You didn't make it so that it's the black schools. You just so happen to have made these systems in place so that there is no other solution. And that's how we get separate but equal for 2024. Remember, I covered this in a podcast earlier this year. 81% of metropolitan schools are more segregated in 2019 than 1990. And a lot of these areas are blue areas. They're liberals. Like, they're liberal-run areas. Like people point out that the South is less segregated than the North now, because in the South, they blatantly banned racial discrimination, which is the only way they knew how to do it at the time, apparently. But in the North, they did this. Malcolm X called this out at the time, where he's like, I don't need to go to the South to see segregated schoolings. I can just go down the block. But since that specific, like, surface level thing was addressed, it's not, like, there's no surface level issues here. Let's move on. Like, that's what it was. And the same thing, it's like, liberal areas were also very heavily segregated. I mean, I didn't want to bring this out too early, but it's like, there's a famous song called Love Me, I'm a Liberal that addresses this very simply, where it's a liberal who literally just like, how can the South do this thing? And then he's like, oh yeah, but in the North, that's different. For the modern day BLM movement, they can agree there's a systemic problem in policing, but what's their plan to fix it? Well, most of them will probably just tell you more diverse cops. What? Like, that's literally what most of the liberals literally think the solution is. And I had this problem in school too, where it's like some people like just kind of like, yeah, if we hire more women cops and more black cops, then these issues will get solved. It's like, that's not how it works. How about we do a complete restructuring of the police system? Or if not, we can simply reallocate fundings to resources to tackle the roots of the problem. Shh! No, you can't do that. What we can do is we can paint George Floyd's name on the sidewalk. Wow. And another thing is gay rights. Like, I mean, a lot of people a lot of people see this liberal thing about gay rights. Most people know this fact. Most liberals, at least on the politician level, didn't really publicly support gay rights until public opinion drastically changed in the 2010s. And right now, libs are spending the campaign saying that they were better for trans people, and now they're throwing trans people under the bus. It's rainbow capitalism, but in political party form. With a special shout out, I'll give a special shout out to this specific sect of liberalism. I don't know how prominent this is in liberalism, but it's very common. I think I've seen this a lot, but it's very common for like liberals, people who are liberals, liberal parents, liberal people, to be like, yes, gay rights, yes, trans rights, yes. And then when it comes to their own family, magically, it's a different story. They're okay with all the stuff when it comes to other people. But when it comes to this side, not that well. Same thing can be said about homelessness. I just remembered. Yeah, homelessness. Liberals love the idea of helping the homeless. Just not if that means you have to build the homeless shelters in this part of the neighborhood. No. Let's get into some other areas where this surface level analysis is really bad. And not just bad in the sense like, oh, it's just not good enough. In the sense that it can actually be harmful. Let's start off with immigration. Liberals could not, in any sense, counter the Republican narrative on immigration, even though it is fucking easy to do. Republicans whine about, illegal immigrants come here. Simply retort with this question, why? Then bring up the fact that the United States has been fucking over countries in the global south and the Middle East for years. Imperialist regime change wars to take their resources, to make it so that they cannot thrive in their own nation, so they are forced to come here. And the United States process to become a legal immigrant is so strict and impossible that the only way they can do it is to come here illegally. That way we can exploit their labor and not give them benefits. And maybe we can act certain policies that make it so that we can actually fix some of these problems. In this current election cycle, AMLO literally gift wrapped Biden a specific plan to address the immigration problem, a very concrete specific plan where Joe Biden would give funding to all these nations that the United States has fucked over in Latin America for years, which would then make it so that they would be able to thrive and then they would be less likely to come to the United States. Biden didn't do that because that wouldn't fit the narrative. They would rather just go back on the narrative like, oh yeah, well, immigrants, blah, blah, blah. Like, they'd rather just jump on the right-wing narrative of immigration because they don't have that much of a difference from them in that sense. Their stance on Israel-Palestine, it all started when Hamas attacked Israel. Like, it doesn't matter if they believe it started on October 7th or if it started, like, when Hamas was founded. That's when it started. Don't look at anything else. Literally nothing else. All they can do is condemn Hamas attacking Israel. The Nakba and anything else that has happened in that situation, non-existent. Same can be said about most Middle Eastern nations. You'll ask a liberal, and they'll be like, well, the terrorists, these guys hate us. Why? Why do they hate us? Because, you know, why do they hate us, Mr. Liberal? Why do they hate us? Why do these terrorists hate us? Because they're religious fundamentalists. The new atheist movement seemed to have that issue a lot, where it's like, oh, well, you see, they hate us because of their religious fundamentalism. Like, there's a very famous debate between George Galloway and Christopher Hitchens, two people who I hate and really just do not like at all. But they both make some points. They both make points that are actually, like, even at the time I understood the points that they were making. It's like, Christopher Hitchens understood that there was, like, a broader, like, you know, extreme radical religion is harmful. Yes, that is a fact. And Galloway explained the very obvious fact, like, yeah, maybe if we stop bombing them, maybe we wouldn't force them to become these radical people. And that's the same thing. It's like, why do these Middle Eastern nations shift so hard to the right on, like religion and all this other stuff? Why? Could it perhaps have something to do with the fact that we've been bombing them for the entirety of their lifetimes? Maybe if we stopped doing that, then maybe we could actually move forward, and they could move forward. Sometimes it'll even go so far as to TERFs. Like, there are a lot of TERFs. They used to be liberals at one point. They were liberals. Like, they were broadly liberals. They were feminists. Like, that's what the term is. Trans-exclusionary radical feminist. They're feminists. And I'd argue TERFs do have a pretty big route in liberal feminism. Because there was a specific section of liberal, feminism. Like, there's a lot of factions of feminism, and we all know this. But, like, liberal feminism is, like, a very specific faction of feminism. It's, like, really not looked upon fondly by other feminists and other, like, people. They're looked fondly in for that specific era of feminism, but nowadays it's looked upon very bad. Because it very much really is just, again, like most liberal things, surface level analysis that will not ever address the actual roots of the problem. Why are women oppressed? Because we're women. Because of our genetics. We are women, and we are oppressed for that reason. Why are men bad? Because they're men. Their genetics tell them they're bad. One big common like trope back in the day was that there were a lot of like people who were feminists who would become lesbian, not because they are actually lesbian, but because they hated men so much that they would just become lesbian. And what did that do? Absolutely nothing, because that's not how it works. And the same thing can be said with this, like, because of the women's chromosomes. That is why they need to be treated better, because they are women. That is their analysis. We are women. We need to be treated better. And men bad, which is what leads them to be like, trans women, gross. You're a man, get out of here. Even though they literally have the same, if not worse, situations than you, but it's like, no. It's a common criticism also because like a lot of like liberal feminists are kind of like white women, so it's like the problems of white women are the ones that we need to put on a pedestal. Here's a flashback from the past that gives you this surface level analysis that's still taught in schools to this day. The Cuban Missile Crisis. We all get taught in school that Russia was sending missiles to Cuba and pointing them to the US, and that JFK valiantly stopped them and saved America from a bloody nuclear war. They don't teach you that part where the United States was literally egging both Cuba and Russia into doing this by putting missiles in Turkey pointed directly to the Soviet Union and trying to overthrow the Castro regime. I wonder why these two nations didn't like us. Speaking of nations that didn't like us, this one is very funny, especially now, because I see this a lot with liberals. They love to shit on the pink tide, and I love me some pink tide leaders, so I always rush to their defense. But they love to shit on the pink tide leaders, and one of the big ways that they love to shit on the pink tide leaders is, you can't like this person. They like China or Russia and hate the United States. I wonder why they don't like us. Could it have anything to do with the fact that the United States have been involved in Latin American regime change since 1865? Could it have anything to do with the fact that we have led to multiple assassinations of their leaders, leading to multiple authoritarian regimes that have killed millions of people? Wonder how many times Russia and China did that. Oh, that's right, none. And that's one of the problems. It's like they literally just like, but that was a long time ago. Why don't they get over it? It's like, it's not a long time ago. A lot of this still happens. But I've actually saved the one issue that I think actually kind of perfectly exemplifies this. I don't know if this is going to be the best one, but there is one issue that I literally was like, I typed this part out and then whatever, and then randomly I thought about, what about this issue? Because I just remembered, it popped in my head, like, yes, this issue really makes sense to me. This makes sense to me, yes, because it all clicks to me at the same time. The issue in question that kind of exemplifies this to a bit to me is how liberals handled the environment. For a long period of time, liberal environmentalism has spent a majority of its time attacking consumers and random people, and not the people who should be blamed for this issue, blaming global warming on them. One of the most infamous examples comes from Captain Planet, who at one point I thought about making a video about, but there's a YouTuber named Edache who has made a video about Captain Planet that really kind of covers basically all the points that I would have covered. So yeah, go watch that video if you haven't. That video, I highly recommend it. But again, literally all of their criticisms towards the environment and all this stuff comes back to you. It's your fault. Why are you driving this car? Get a hybrid or get an electric car. Or ride a bike or something. You need to pick up the garbage on the ground that you just threw down. Like you threw a Coke can and then it landed on the ground instead of the trash can. You need to go back and pick that up, or else you're a hateful, disgusting person. You leave the room, you gotta turn the light off when you leave the room, or else you are part of the problem. And the worst case scenario of liberal environmentalism is that it led to a rise in talk about the quote-unquote issue of overpopulation. With people arguing that one of the reasons why the situation on the earth is so bad is because we are overpopulated. Carbon is in the air because overpopulation. Overpopulation leads to more people putting carbon in the air. Because remember, you're the problem. And that's why people are starving in the earth, because there's too many people. We can't feed them. Ignore the fact that we produce enough food in the world to feed 10 billion people, and we are a population of 8 billion people. And there is one more big problem with that. It's one thing, but there's a really big problem with that. A lot of the time, they focus a lot on countries like India, China, and the entire continent of Africa. Like, oh, these are the ones that are causing the problem because of the big population boom. It's like, it's very interesting. What do these three nations have in common again? Oh yeah, there's not a lot of white people. Interesting. Interesting that these are the countries that get pointed out the most, and not the United States. Interesting. Let's point out another fact. The person who literally on Captain Planet, the show, literally made an episode, 2 episodes in fact, talking about overpopulation. And literally, like the guy who made that episode was like, people are having too much kids. We need less kids in the world. He has 5 kids. Interesting. But don't worry, he's white and well off, so that's different. And for anybody who actually does think that, because on a first glance, that sounds like a smart idea. Like, again, on a surface level analysis, it makes sense. Like, yeah, more people on Earth equals less resources equals more carbon in the air. Well, there are many reasons why that's wrong. I already pointed out the fact that we can feed 10 billion people and we have 8 billion people on the planet. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't have the routes to distribute that food. We could make that, but that wouldn't be a moneymaker. Also, I'd like you to look at this. The maps between carbon emissions and the maps between populations. And notice that it's not how it works. Africa has a lot of population. They don't produce a lot of carbon because they don't have a lot of the resources that other quote-unquote developed nations do. And there's a study that literally states point blank that if 75 million people from India, China, and Africa just completely either, like in this scenario, just decided, you know what, we're going to fix our problems and just going to drop, like they're going to have their carbon footprint be 0, it would have minimal change on climate change. And the problem is, like, yes, like a lot of these things I've said before, it's like, yes, it is somewhat good. Yes, I get it. Yes, a hybrid is more environmentally conscious. Yes, I get that. Yes, it is better for us to recycle all the, like, water bottles that we have rather than throw them in the trash. I get it. And yes, I understand. The average American has a 20 metric ton carbon footprint. Yes, I understand this fact. That is all well and good. Doing these things are fine. I try to be somewhat environmentally conscious whenever I do things. I'm the one member of my family that really tries to prioritize recycling. Every time there's a light in a room that no one's in, I turn it off. Even if someone's like, I'm just going to go right back in there. It's like, no, I choose to do that. When I never get a car, I really plan to get a hybrid. Like, look, average human being in 2021, 20 metric tons of carbon in the air. That same year, only 100 companies put a total of 1,824,243,529 metric tons of carbon in the air. Me turning off my lights when I'm not using them isn't going to fix the problem. Unless you are actually going to address the system that allows that carbon to be put in the air, you're not actually going to fix the problem. Libs have tried, but even now, they're band-aids on bullet holes. The stuff that libs are pushing now are things that would have been great for the 1980s when we could just put band-aids on the bullet hole. Like, back then, it was just scratches that we could put band-aids on. But now we're at a point where anything less than a complete systematic overhaul can never address the issue of climate change. Me being unable to be a liberal is the same as why I can't be a conservative. I want to fix the problems permanently. I do not want to fix the problem for the time being. I don't want to actively cause, like, if I was a conservative, I would be actively pushing for the problems. If I was a liberal, I'd be effectively, like, being like, oh, let's put a little band-aid on the bullet hole. No, I want to give that person a tourniquet. I want to give that person a gauze. I want to sew the hole shut. I want to fix the problem permanently. That's truly why I'm a socialist, or, like, even more left. I genuinely, I want to fix the systemic problem forever. I don't want to have to go back and fix this problem in 10 years. But I want to answer this question. Why is liberalism such a surface level ideology? I keep calling it that, surface level, because that's really what I think it is. Liberalism is surface level and nothing more. If you are a liberal, you really think, like, that, and this is why. The reason why is because liberals broadly believe society is good. Either because they're doing well. Usually it's because they're just doing well. If they're not doing well, then they probably wouldn't agree. They probably wouldn't agree with that. They broadly go, well, I mean, even if there's a little rough around the edges, broadly I broadly think that this is good. Remember, liberals met Donald Trump's Make America Great Again with America is already great. Aside from a few tweaks here and there, they think the way we run the world is fine and don't want to change it. And when it comes to that, it'll be a situation where it's change versus not change. As Phil Uck said in Love Me, I'm a Liberal, liberals are 10 degrees to the left of center in good times, 10 degrees to the right if it affects them personally. They're fine with fixing societal problems that don't affect them, but when it does, that's where it's going to be a problem. And it's the same thing. They love the idea of we need to have it so that schools in the South are desegregated. But if you ask me to bus my children, that's going a little bit too far. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. That's how the song goes. When they are ultimately faced with a choice, change or status quo, they choose status quo almost every single time. It's not universal. It's not universal, especially with this situation, because sometimes liberals are faced with a very difficult choice. Choice of keeping things the way they are under conservatives, or changing things under leftists. And a lot of times they choose the former. They choose helping conservatives. Macron refused to let the left get a government in France. Liberals in Israel pushed for a massive coalition to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu. They were we need to work really hard to get a broad anti-Netanyahu coalition. And they were able to find good bedfellows in the far-right political party Yamina and the Islamic fundamentalist party Ram. But when it came to the only left-wing party in the Knesset, Hadash Tal, magically they're no, there's not enough room for you guys, sorry. In Colombia, all the liberals and all the conservatives teamed up to defeat the left-wing government of Gustavo Petro. The most infamous example we have in the United States is that libs in the DNC really worked hard to hurt Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 and helped Trump to do so. And continue to do so despite the fact that every single situation, they claim they hate Trump, but they don't. They love Trump. It's very obvious, but they try to hide it. Die-hard liberals are snakes that will stab you in the back when you least expect it. They'll betray everything they claim to support to get ahead. Liberals claim to love the homeless, yet oppose for affordable housing and having absolute shit plans for homeless people. Remember when there were signs out there where liberals were no human is illegal? And then Biden and Kamala got in when it was time for the election to roll in. They're well, you see, actually, there's actually kind of a point about these dirty illegals. Now that we think about it, California, the land of the libs, love freedom, love equality, just voted to keep slavery. Remember that? Liber, Latin for free. And they literally voted to keep prisoners as slaves. Slave labor. Interesting. Woodrow Wilson ran on keeping us out of war. 150 days later, we enter the war. Obama ran on hope and change, and we got basically the same. Wanted to close Guantanamo? It's still open now. Liberals are just, that's literally it. Again, surface level. That's their surface level analysis. I coined a phrase that I don't know if I heard this phrase, but I've always thought about this phrase because I don't remember if I heard this somewhere. I might have heard a bastardization of a similar thing, but this is a phrase that I always interpret in my head when I think of liberals. Liberals praise the activism of yesteryear, but frown upon the activism of today. And that's really one of the big things that people really understand. It's they love the civil rights marches. Yes, civil rights marches. Woohoo! Martin Luther King Jr., let's go, guys. But BLM protesters, nah, that's a bit too far, guys. That's a little bit, no, you can't do that. That's a little bit, They love people who protested against the Iraq and Vietnam wars. But when it comes to protesting about any wars nowadays, especially Palestine, ew, gross. They love it when people were protesting for the women's right to vote. But no, whenever there's any women's suffrage thing or women's rights thing, LGBTQ rights thing that's happening now, no. That's a bit too far, guys. Gay rights. There's when the gays were fighting to kiss each other, yes, we support that. But when they're doing this thing, that's weird. That's cringe. That's weird. Even though the exact same arguments that are used against that, like the stuff that's going on now, were used in the protests back in the day. I've heard this, I definitely have heard this quote from someone else, but I don't remember who it is. It's like, if you want to see where you would stand on an issue in the past, find out where you stand on issues now. Because a lot of people like to have this main character complex. A lot of people like to claim like, oh yeah, if I was younger, if I was in the civil rights, if I was in the slave eras, I would have been like a part of the Underground Railroad. I would have been like, no, you wouldn't have. You would be doing what you're doing now. That's what you would be doing. I think it was a fucking Bill Burr quote. I think it was a Bill Burr joke actually, where he's like, no, you'd be sitting there right here. You'd be doing this, and that's the same thing. I fully acknowledge this fact. I fully acknowledge that if I were around in the slave time periods, I would be the guy reading the fucking newspaper, be like, yes, John Brown, go get him, boys. But I'd never be the guy to lift up the gun to go help fight him. Because I'm a coward, I acknowledge this. At most, I would have been the Garrett Smith of the crowd and be like, hey, Mr. Brown, come over here. Appreciate what you do, my brother. And then inside of his hand is like a huge sack of cash, and it's like, but that's the thing, like, liberals like to do the thing where it's like, no, you see, these guys are too radical. Like, no, what these guys were advocating for, no, this was fine, but what these guys are advocating for is too radical. It's like, look, guys, it's not radical to want to, like, literally, it's not. Like, what, back in the day, they were radicals. Today's radicals are tomorrow's moderates. Another quote that I either made up or heard from someone else who's way smarter than me. Let me get to a quote that I can actually attribute to someone who is actually smarter than me. Lenin. I saw this quote being parroted around because, like, on Veterans Day, they, like, said, like, oh, we salute Harriet Tubman for her helping with the troops. And this is the quote. This is the full quote. During the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes constantly hounded them, received their theories with the most savage malice, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaigns of lies and slander. After their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them, so to say, and to hollow their names to a certain extent for the consultation of the oppressed classes, and with the object of duping the latter, while at the same time robbing the revolutionary theory of its substance, blunting its revolutionary edge, and vulgarizing it. Biggest example I can think of, Martin Luther King Jr. At the time of his lifetime, he was hated by conservatives, obviously. A lot of those very common political cartoons that people keep throwing around, yeah, they're mostly conservative political cartoons. But liberals hated MLK too. Multiple interviews on liberal media outlets literally tried to get MLK to kind of like goad himself into backing himself in a corner. Like, yeah, but like, are you like actually like proposing like violent riots and stuff? Like, yeah, I mean, come on. And he's like, no, we don't advocate for riots. It's like, but are you sure? Are you sure you're doing that? Are you sure? Which leads into one of the biggest turnoffs from the broadest group of people because of this. Because here's the thing. Everybody knows all the things that I've said. They don't say it, but they know it. They understand this. Everybody understands this. And this leads into one big thing. Like, you think conservatives don't see this fact where it's like, you canonize this person, but then denounce this person? And they don't see it as like a broad, like, actual political analysis. Well, they see it as what it is. Hypocrisy. You think people don't notice that and connect their dots to their outlook? The self-centered, barely politically literate upper-middle-class liberal is one of the most well-known political caricatures in the modern day. And libs don't do a good job of hiding it either. Pelosi showing off her expensive ice cream during the COVID-19 pandemic. Anybody remember that thing? But Pelosi did X to help people. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. Biden and Harris were the most pro-union president they were the most pro-union administration in the history of the United States, especially in modern day. And one of the biggest unions, refused to back them. Kamala, literally, they refused to back her. And many of them liked Trump despite his extremely anti-union record. People go on vibes and have amnesia for 4 years. Unless libs can run a person who understands this, they're dead. Like, unless libs can understand someone who doesn't have the surface level analysis, who can run on this kind of stuff, they won't do anything. And the worst part is, they had that right there next to Kamala. Tim Walz. He ran on vibes and no-nonsense answers to very obvious solutions. There are children hungry in my country? Let's feed them. Hello? Very obvious. And there's a reason why. It's because Tim Walz isn't necessarily liberal. Like, he is. Yes, he's a liberal. But yes, he's a Minnesota liberal. But that's the thing. Minnesota's specific breed of liberalism is inspired by the populism of the Farmer Labor Party, which actually has elements of socialism in there. So again, socialism saves the day. Why not? Like, I mean, yeah, this is a big thing. That's why liberalism is dead. Liberalism is dead. It is dead. Because it cannot do this. The age of liberalism is no more. There is no way a liberal can win the modern day political environment. If the Dem Party wants to live, they have to reject liberalism and become a left-wing populist party. Because left-wing populists, even though they have they can actually address systemic, real problems, and also go off vibes-based, like, things. Now you might say, well, come on. How does this work electorally and or in a practice? How does this work? There's no way this works. Your ideology and this kind of stuff doesn't work. Oh, really? Venezuela, Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Paraguay, Uruguay, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Egypt, Sri Lanka, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, New Zealand, Australia, England, Scotland, Spain. It has worked electorally, and it can work in governance. And now this is the one thing I know was going to happen. There's going to be at least one person who's a quote-unquote well-intentioned liberal out there. It's not like conservatives who are incredibly stupid and the most evil people deep down. Liberals are just the former. They're stupid. They're misguided. Like, you're so close to the answer, but for some reason, despite it staring right at you, you fail to see it. And this is the one thing. It was like the crux of the original concept of my video, liberals are not your friends, was going to be the idea that I was going to try and convince socialists to try and radicalize you. If you actually cared about the issues you claim to care about deep down, then literally you should be open to the ideas of socialism. Like, even like on the definition of a liberal in a social sense, you should be open to hearing out socialists and listening to their ideas and actually be open to it. If you don't agree, even if you don't agree, I think it's worth discussing and worth seeing. Like, again, if you really cared about the issues of equality and stuff, then you would realize that liberalism just can't fulfill it. Like, that's the thing. That's the contrast of your ideology. You have two wolves inside of you. One demands equality and fighting for the little guy. The other one demands complete and utter loyalty to capitalism. The latter wolf will kill that first wolf before you have any chance to even think about it. So you have to kill the second wolf before that. I mean, FDR listened to liberals, and it led to the greatest economic boom in the United States' history. But yeah, the truth of the matter is liberalism is dead, and there is no way that it can survive in the modern day. If it will, like, the best case scenario is that it just goes peacefully. But if that were the case, it would have died years ago. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.